This is Rabbi Koretz. She is the rabbi of the Shir Tikva congregation that meets in Frisco, and is going to talk a little bit about the Ten Commandments from a Jewish perspective and from a rabbi's perspective.
Wonderful. Congratulations on your study. I know it's going to be wonderful and fulfilling and meaningful. And I just want to talk to you a little bit today about what the Jewish religion and faith, how we view the Ten Commandments and commandments in general, and maybe a little bit about the Torah too.
That would be great. That's perfect.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. Well, we're about to celebrate our holiday of Shavuot in a week from now. And so it's 50 days after the Israelites are redeemed from slavery in Egypt, and they're walking on their way, right? They pass through the sea, and they're walking in the desert, and they're going toward Mount Sinai, where they're ultimately going to get the Ten Commandments and, in fact, all of the Torah.
Right.
And so you're learning about the Ten Commandments, but let me also just say what happens at Sinai, and part of the desert experience is that the Israelite nation were a people that are connected as a family up until now. We're the children of Israel, the children of Jacob, and all of their descendants, right? They go down because there's a famine in the land, and Joseph becomes second to Pharaoh, and eventually all the Israelite brothers and sisters move down there, raise families. But then you know that a new Pharaoh arises that doesn't know Joseph, it doesn't know the Israelite nation, and we become enslaved for 400 years. Okay, so we're really just connected by familial bonds. Our ancestors believe in the one God, but they don't have any laws or practice, so to speak. When we get to Mount Sinai, we get the law, starting by the first with the Ten Commandments, and ultimately all of the oral and written Torah is dictated to Moses on Mount Sinai. He writes down the written part, and the oral part is taught from generation to generation, father to son, father to son. Moses teaches it to the elders first, and then they pass it on. So this is where all of our Jewish laws come together, and what really forms us into the Jewish people. Because before that, we don't have a faith or holiday celebration or anything that really brings us together quite the way that the Torah does.
So Moses got not just the written, but the oral laws in Mount Sinai. I didn't know that.
Yes. And we have this tradition that that's what happened, and so many of the laws in the Torah don't really make sense without kind of the companion oral law. Now, why did we have the oral law? Why wasn't it just all written? I don't know the answer to that. Perhaps God wanted us to, through faith, to learn the oral tradition, pass it on personally from generation to generation. Now, it does become written down, as you know. After the fall of the Second Temple in the year 70, our people are dispersed, kicked out of our land, and sent out. And the rabbis start to realize there's a chance this tradition could be lost. We can't lose our sacred tradition. We can't lose the oral law. And they begin to write it down. And that starts in the first codes. The Mishnah is codified in the year 200 AD. And then they write down more of it in two different locations, one Babylon and one north in Israel. And they put those together with the Mishnah and then the commentary on the Mishnah, the Gemara, and together they're called the Talmud.
Right.
And that is really what guides us as the Jewish people today. It's not just the Torah, because we can't understand the Torah in a vacuum without, that's the written law, the 5 books of Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, and then the other books that follow the prophets and the writings, those are all part of our canon, but they're always meant to be understood in the context with the oral law.
And is there one law that is more important than others?
That's a good question that the rabbis debate. So we have 613 commandments in total in the Torah. And so in theory, they would all be the same. They're all just commandments, that's it.
Sure.
They're mitzvot. They're what God told us to do. But what trumps all other commandments, according to us and our tradition, is to save a life. So if you can't fast because it would harm your life on Yom Kippur, you don't fast. If you need to break the Sabbath to save somebody's life, you would do that. If you need to eat pork every day because the doctor tells you this is the one cure to your sickness, so you'll eat pork every day. And
pork is better barbecue than brisket every single day of the week.
I don't know if that's true, but I love brisket. So we break all other laws to save life. Yeah, okay. Because we're taught that we live by the commandments and by corollary not die by them. Okay. So it's always, and also we're all created, I'd say, like from the very beginning, in the creation story, we're taught that we're created B'Tselem Elohim, in God's image. And so what does that mean? Because we don't look alike and nobody else looks like us. We know that there's something about us that's godly. Our soul, our neshama, that's in God's image. Everyone is born with it, and we need to treat all people with the utmost dignity, respect, and compassion and love. And so I would say those kind of two are the basis for all the rest. If you're breaking those two, you can't, just because you don't eat pork and because you keep the Sabbath,
Right.
it doesn't really seem to matter.
Right.
Some of our mitzvot repeat often. And so, for example, in the Ten Commandments, we have the importance of keeping the Sabbath day for holiness. And it's repeated many times in the Torah. But the commandment that is repeated the most times, about 36 times, is our commandment to take care of and love and treat the stranger humanely. Sorry,
Right.
humanely. And so we understand that just because it's repeated so many times to mean that this is serious, guys. We really mean this. This is
One of those things you have to do.
Yeah. There, you might occasionally, fall down on some of the other commandments, but one that's repeated and drilled into us so much, and really part of our story, because that's part of our living through over 400 years of slavery and then getting redeemed, to know the plight of the stranger, to know what it's like to be discriminated against, to be enslaved, to be taken advantage of, and to know how wrong that is deep in our soul, in our genetic memory, and to make sure that others don't have to suffer that same fate.
So as a rabbi, when you're in training, do you have to know all 613?
That's a good question. It's not something
Is that a fair question to ask?
Yeah, it's not something specifically that we
Okay.
memorize. No.
So there's no test like, okay, what's number 372?
Many of the commandments can be no longer followed anymore because they
Right.
have to do with the temple standing in Jerusalem. So
Right.
almost half of the commandments are not ones we currently follow because we don't have a temple anymore.
Oh, that's
Right? So the temple was destroyed in 70, and in the Messianic age, God will decide if God will rebuild the temple or what will happen next, but humans aren't going to make that decision.
Okay. Is there anything for my people, and not Christians, but my people at Faith Bridge, the 10 Commandments, you got to know this? Or is it pretty much the way you and I would talk about them is the same? And it's
I would
all
think so.
good?
One that's a little bit confusing, and this always comes up when I talk about the Ten Commandments to people, and I bet it does for you too. So, do not kill.
Right.
It says do not kill. Do not murder, sorry, is not the same as do not kill.
Right.
So the Ten Commandments is against murder. Killing is not encouraged, but sometimes...
It's not encouraged.
Right. I'm not saying we should kill, but I'm saying there are ways around killing. War, self-defense, protecting your family when somebody's trying to murder you, to stop them. So that's always something that's confusing. People say, well, how can we do this? I'm just like, oh, it says do not murder, not do not kill.
Right.
Sometimes you have to kill people. It's very unfortunate, but there are wars, there are, self-defense situations where one would be called upon to kill or be killed, and it's your responsibility to stop somebody.
And sometimes when I talk about that commandment in particular, and I'll extend the definition of murder, right? So like going into take care of your neighbor, don't kill a soul, and don't, tear someone apart, because it's not killing a life, but it is killing a spirit, and that's every bit as violent, and sometimes even more so.
That is a perfect example of where our oral law comes in.
Right.
So gossip. The rabbis
Right.
teach us from the oral tradition that gossip kills 3 people, okay? So
Okay.
you can imagine one of the 3 is the person getting gossiped about, right?
Right.
And the other 2 are the person gossiping,
Yep.
right? And the person
And the
listening.
listening. Ooh, I didn't think
So
about that.
it really, and so that has nothing to do with actual murder, but we talk about it because it kill a person's reputation.
Yep.
It kills a person's soul listening, the person speaking it, spewing out hatred of some sort, So we do really think along those lines, that you can extrapolate a lot from these commandments, and not just follow them, it just in their most simple sense.
Right. Well, there's nothing simple about them.
There's nothing simple about it, and they all relate. We consider it
Right.
just a compendium that all relates, so it really goes back to what we started with about B'Tselem Elohim, that we're all created in the divine image.
Right.
And so that really figures right into that situation. We would do everything we can to respect one's dignity, and so when we don't, through something as seemingly simple as gossip,
Right.
sometimes it just sounds simple, it's not something terrible you're saying, but there are real world consequences, and it can't get just taken back, the same way that a killing can.
Right. Thank you very much.
Absolutely,
for your
my
time.
pleasure.
Absolutely.
Best
Thank
of
you.
luck in your study.
Thank you. Thank you.